My name is Matt Littlefield, President and Principal Analyst for LNS Research. And I really appreciate Michael's slides giving LNS a mention. We've been in the market for 3 years and put us next to Gartner, one of our big competitors. So it's always fun to see that growth in our own company. But really our focus is helping companies like yours understand the space, understanding how you can grow your own business, the trends around leadership, around business process and technology. So we've developed a maturity model over the past year based on about 800 companies we've benchmarked through our surveys. So hopefully this will give each of you some insight into how quality fits into your businesses and business process excellence, and how you can take some of that information back to your own businesses to improve. And given the Accelerus acquisition and the impending Dassault acquisition, we'll spend a little bit of time too talking about how we think quality fits into that overall life cycle, because it's an important piece. So here's some of the things I want to share today. I want to talk a little bit about who LNS Research is and how we do our research. I won't belabor the point, but I think it's important to understand how research is conducted before you use it in your own business planning. We'll talk about some of the trends in life science today as we see it, and then we'll go through our maturity framework. And hopefully that's where you'll get the meat of the presentation, where you'll get some insights to take back to your own businesses. And then finally, we'll summarize that with some recommendations for success, and I think we have a Q&A at the end. So as I mentioned, we're an industry analyst firm. We provide research and advisory services to a number of different types of manufacturing companies mainly. Our focus is on quality, but then also more broadly, engineering and manufacturing. So we look at a large portion of the value chain. We have deep research on both the quantitative and qualitative side. So we do a number of different surveys on the quality management space as well as others. And then we do a number of case studies as well. So as we go through the maturity model, I have 4 different case studies that I'd like to share with everybody that really highlights the benefits of some of these approaches. And then we also have some quantitative research that shows the metrics improvements for taking some of these best practices. We also have an executive council. So this is where we've driven a lot of the case studies that we're sharing today. We meet quarterly as a group. All of these companies are represented by their quality leadership, generally corporate quality, but in some cases it may be supply chain or engineering. We talk about emerging topics of interest. So we've talked about EQMS, we've talked about risk management, we've talked about metrics and improvement, and we'll share some of those case studies today. This is the broader data set that we'll be talking about and sharing today. You can see we had about 800 companies participate in this research study. It went over the entire course of 2013. The way that people participate in this study, it's a social research model. So we have a research library on our site. Companies that are interested in reading that research can create an account, take a survey, and then get access to our research. We also have premium research, but that's the main driver behind this research. So that's why we call it a social research model. Those people who are participating in the research are also benefiting and reading the research. You can see we had almost 20% of the respondents were from the life sciences industry. So for us, that's pharma, biotech, and med device. So just about 100 respondents, just over 100 respondents of the overall survey were from the life sciences. And you can see we also have a pretty good split across company size and geography. So I think we actually matched the Accelerus distribution pretty well, about 50% North America, about around 35, 40% Europe, and then about 10%, 15% Asia. So this is the maturity framework that we've developed. It looks at several different things. First, it looks at the performance of a company and whether or not you're lagging performance or whether or not you're kind of in the middle of performance. And then finally, if you're really achieving that market leadership position. So performance, I think, is a big part of maturity. But then it's also about how well you can serve your customers. So at the ad hoc position, we see companies not really being able to address current client needs. They're scrambling. They don't have that ability to address customer needs. As companies increase with maturity, they gain the ability to start addressing some of those customer needs more strategically and also look forward to where those customer needs are going in the future. At the final stages, we look at agile and market leaders. These companies can be adaptive. They can be proactive. And they really can get ahead of the market and even be disruptive to markets. And we're seeing that very much in the life sciences today with some of the different companies that are really changing the business models that we all operate by. This here is the overall framework, so the 6 different areas where we think companies really need to look at to improve performance. So the first piece we look at is strategy and execution. We work with a lot of executives around how they think quality should fit into their corporate culture and also into their corporate strategy. There's a lot of companies that struggle with this today, and they don't really build quality into their management systems. So that really hits the leadership and the culture side. On the organizational side, you see companies maybe have that separate governance process around quality, maybe not building quality into the incentive structures, and a lot of challenges can ensue from that. So we're seeing companies try and move to incorporate it into the leadership skill set and also into the management systems. And then finally, where I want to spend most of my time focusing today is on quality business processes, technology capabilities, and then how you measure performance in time. So metrics and management of those KPIs. So we'll spend some time on how companies move from disconnected systems and processes towards a more harmonized and standardized set of processes, and then how you create real-time visibility around those processes to have measurement of both your process health as well as your process results. And we think that's kind of this idea of operational excellence and continuous improvement, which we should infuse with all those things that we do in quality. So with that backdrop of our frameworks and how we conduct our research, I really want to dive into some of those current trends that we're seeing in the life sciences today. And I think some of these trends are bigger than even the life sciences. It's just around social behavior, how we interact, how we consume information, how we consume news, and where we think our trusted sources are from. So if you look at traditional media, there's been a big change in ownership, right? A lot of these stalwarts of publishing have changed hands, have been sold, bought over the past 5, 10, even the past year. So those models are breaking. But there are models around, let's say, RSS feeds, for example. It was not overly heralded, but this year Google shut down Google Reader. And it's really the move towards social. So the idea is social proof, where you don't really want to be told what to think. You want to be able to gather that information from your own social network, and those people that are sharing that information are the ones that you trust. And that's the way that decisions are being shaped, and that's important to folks in quality. A lot of our executive council members now are really trying to think about how do we build in social media monitoring and customer sentiment into our quality process. How do these activities in the social sphere impact our quality decision making? Can these trigger nonconformances? Can we do a root cause analysis of things that we're seeing in review sites or on traditional social media sites into our quality process? So there's a number of companies focused on this today, and I think it's where the industry is moving in general. Another major IT trend that I think is impacting the life sciences is around the Internet of Things. So it's the connection of people, process, sensor networks, smart devices. These are transforming how we produce products, as well as what those products are. So wearable wellness is a major trend today around Fitbits, which I'm sure some folks in the audience are wearing today. At the CES show in Las Vegas a little bit ago, we had the smart toothbrush. These things are kind of a novelty, but they will transform, I think, overall the life sciences industry and all industries in general. So connecting our machines and connecting our personal products to the cloud and giving additional analytics around that is transforming a lot of life sciences today. The other piece is just information from those machines. So if you look at the medical device industry, we have a case study from one of the large medical device companies that makes the MRI diagnostic machines. There's so much data coming off those machines that can feed into predictive maintenance, but can also feed into our failure modes. It can feed into our quality processes. So collecting that data and making decisions off that data, I think, is a key trend going forward. And then also in manufacturing processes themselves. So we're not just transforming the products we make, but we're also transforming how we make those products. So item level serialization, an explosion of data on the shop floor in terms of sensor networks, asset data, process data. Those all can feed into our quality systems and transform the way that we do root cause analysis and improve the products that we produce. So it's a transformation from being more than just compliance to really delivering business value and quality. So these are just some of the trends that I think are changing in technology and are also impacting quality. So how do we drill that down into the life sciences organizations themselves? I think you have to look at two sides of the equations, really OEMs on the med device side, and then big pharma or biotech, and then the suppliers to these companies. So on the OEM side, big pharma side, we're seeing a move towards delivering services, not just products. So tying in those services is an important way of adding value to those customers or patients. The development of apps. So there's a lot of companies today that are not just building products, they're building software alongside those products. So on the engineering side, you see an adoption of software engineers and software management capabilities alongside those engineering R&D capabilities. Social media monitoring technologies, we see this in the CRM systems, we see these in other systems, and pulling that into the quality. And we need really robust management systems and business processes to address these challenges that we're seeing. On the supplier side, there's also some transformations that are going on. So big OEMs, big pharma, they're doing more outsourcing. There's a lot more opportunity for those suppliers, but the stakes are higher. And the demands on them for providing process visibility and for collaborating effectively are going and increasing as well. So we have to be proactive, I think, if we're on the supplier side, to addressing the needs of what those larger companies are trying to do in terms of transforming their business products, as well as transforming the processes and services that they offer. So let's dive into how this impacts strategy and execution for companies today. So in the survey, we looked at what are companies' top quality management objectives in the life sciences as well as for other companies. So in a lot of the discrete manufacturing industries, we see that cost of total quality being the primary quality objective companies are focused on. But in life sciences, it actually is more laser focused on reducing nonconformances in manufacturing, which perhaps has maybe been a gap in the past. But then also this focus on risk and compliance, which you just don't see to the same degree in other industries. So overall, it's not cost of quality in life sciences. We see manufacturing as an issue, we see compliance as an issue, and we see risk as an issue. Hopefully that resonates with some of the things that your companies are focused on. And there are some specific challenges that go along with achieving these objectives that we see today. When we look at the life sciences industries, they have many more challenges around disparate quality systems and disparate data sources. So you heard Kevin mention before, life sciences companies across clinical, regulatory, and risk, they don't want 6 different systems. They want to try and harmonize these systems and bring it together with a single set of quality processes and technologies. Another challenge I think we have in life sciences is cultural. Because of the nature of the industry, we have very strong quality departments, and they can take on more of a policing role, or hey, that's a quality issue, it's not a manufacturing issue, or it's not a service issue. And I think we need to try and change that within the industry. We really have to be collaborative, and you want to have this sense of quality as a shared responsibility. And we see a lot of companies trying to move that way. It's happened in, let's say, automotive manufacturing and most of the discrete markets. That's what a lot of leading companies are doing. I don't think we've moved there really in quality in life sciences yet. And then finally, we see this lack of visibility into suppliers. It's a major challenge in life sciences. Again, some of the discrete manufacturing industries have addressed this. If you look at automotive with PPAP, they've been doing it for 20 years, right? In life sciences, this outsourcing is a much newer trend, and they don't have the visibility tools that a lot of other industries have built up over time. So a lot of the collaborative supply chain platforms and solutions can help address that challenge. So how do you boil that down? What are some of the best practices that we're seeing leading companies focused on today? First off, I think some of those initial trends that I mentioned around transforming social media and how it impacts buying decisions or how it impacts healthcare decisions is definitely a trend that has to be addressed in corporate initiatives and around our product strategies and process strategies. Another thing that we're seeing companies start to work on is aligning their financial metrics with their operational metrics and quality metrics. So we talk a lot about process health and process results. If you don't have a clear understanding of how your quality nonconformances impact your operational and financial results, it's hard to get the attention of others within the organization and drive that cultural change. So some analytics there can really go a long way. Another thing that we're seeing companies focus on and move towards is understanding how quality impacts all stages of the value chain. So in the R&D stage, the manufacturing stage, and the delivery stage, those need to collaborate with each other and be connected across the quality processes. Non-conformances can happen anywhere. Root causes can happen everywhere. So we're seeing companies bringing those together. And then as companies advance, we see a move towards risk management within the strategy of companies. Most companies, we have a case study on this as well, think of risk as a growth of their quality systems. So they've maybe invested in the GMP system and think of that as one of the feeders into enterprise risk and how to make better decisions incorporating risk into your strategies. And then finally, I think as quality professionals, taking in that continuous improvement objectives and culture can drive our overall corporate culture. So a lot of the things that we take for granted in quality can benefit the larger organization. I think that feeds into this, the leadership and culture portion. In some cases, those executives really believe in quality. Sometimes it takes some bottom-up education. I want to share also some benchmark data that we have. This is a little bit of a review of Statistics 101. I don't know how many folks remember box plots, but it's a good way to visualize the distribution of performance. So in a box plot, you have a couple of different important points. Dots are outliers. I don't think we have too many of those here. But we have the maximum and minimums, which are the best performers and the worst performers for a particular metric. We do a lot of our research here on OEE. Then you have the different quartiles. So the two thin whiskers, those are the top 25% of performers and bottom 25% of performers. You have the two thick boxes, so those are the middle 25 quartiles. And then you have the median, that's the middle 50% of performers. So really for companies where you want to be is in that top 25% and as close as possible to the maximum. So OEE, for folks who don't understand OEE or haven't maybe used it in their business, it stands for Overall Equipment Effectiveness. It looks across 3 different areas of manufacturing. It looks at the availability of assets. It looks at the efficiency of those assets. And then it looks at the quality of products produced on those assets. And so it's a good holistic measure of your overall manufacturing quality performance. And you can roll it up across particular assets to production lines to the overall facility. And what we've seen is, the way you can read it, there's 3 different types of companies that we've looked at. Those companies in the green bar are those companies that currently have executive focus on quality. It's tied into their executive agenda. Then you have companies who either don't focus on quality or they're planning to focus on quality. And what we've seen is companies that have that executive focus on quality really have a 9% higher OEE than other companies. It's a major improvement. And it goes to show just how impactful corporate and executive agendas can be. A 9% improvement in OEE represents hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars for some companies. So how does that feed into leadership and culture? I think quality has to be a top executive priority. Executives can only have so many priorities, right? 1, 2, 3 top priorities, maybe 4. Quality has to be a big part of that. We talked about quality as a shared responsibility. That's what the leaders are talking about today. And it has to be a sense of responsibility across all levels of the organization, right from somebody on the production line or in R&D, all the way up to the highest executive. There has to be good learning management capabilities in place that educate people on the systems, on the processes, and even take that to risk and compliance. There needs to be a sense of leading by example, a sense of accountability. We hear that all the time from leading companies. Doing it yourselves drives that culture, so there has to be that level of accountability. And then the final stage, I think, is really pushing that out to your supply base. So your culture, your processes have to be transformed out and pushed out to that supply base. So the final piece I want to get into before we do our first case study is around organizational capabilities and the value of cross-functional teams. So again, we did a study of companies that currently have cross-functional teams in place to drive the quality agenda across the organization versus those companies that don't. And again, we saw an increase of about 4% of OEE, which, again, it's a major improvement in OEE for manufacturing. So quality, the theme I want to communicate is that quality drives not just compliance, but it also drives operational efficiency and performance. So here are some of the things that we're seeing companies focus on when it comes to organizational capabilities. So fully integrating quality into the corporate structure. So we're seeing those leading companies having quality either reporting into the CEO or maybe into one layer below the CEO, but really quality being a major part of the organizational structure. Incorporating quality and compliance into executive compensation plans, again, a trend that a lot of leading companies are taking. Learning management, we see more and more from a number of different companies, helping companies understand what those best practices are and pushing those out across the organization. We're also seeing the development of quality skill sets. A lot of companies have your leadership playbook and how your identified future leaders have to mature. And building quality into that, those materials, is an important step for building the culture. Cross-functional teams, we saw the data point on that driving value. It's important that quality is not an island, that you have operations, that you have finance, that you have IT, R&D, manufacturing, all involved in what that quality perspective looks like. And then finally, a lot of companies today have operational excellence initiatives, Six Sigma teams, continuous improvement teams. Very often, they're off in manufacturing, disconnected from the quality organization. And leading companies we're seeing bringing these together. Sometimes it's around a cost of quality initiative, could be around other initiatives, but there's a lot of energy that has been put into those organizations within large companies, and connecting them to quality is an important piece. So here's a case study that we did. This gentleman spoke at one of our recent council meetings. It's an interesting company. They're a large specialty chemical company. They feed into many life sciences companies, their supplier. They've gotten rid of titles in their company. So he doesn't really have a title. He reports to the CEO. He manages all supply chain and quality for a multi-billion-dollar company. So senior guy, but doesn't have that title, which I thought was interesting. And I think it connects to their overall transformation strategy. The new management team came in about 3 or 4 years ago. They put in place these 4 different trends or initiatives that they're trying to establish across their company. I'm sure many of your organizations have a similar set of themes or ideas that they're trying to communicate across the organization. And they really did put quality right in the center as one of the 4 most important things that they do as a company. So really having quality at the center of their overall operational strategy drove a lot of success for them. They also tied quality into the overall supply chain vision. So again, you see the full value chain, and they think about quality through their TQM initiative as overall enhancement of their success. So quality is integral to their overall supply chain. And then I think the most interesting thing that they did is they built quality directly into their leadership tool set. So they had identified key capabilities of quality leaders within the organization and highlighted this right from the CEO down. And I think they're really important for changing that culture, which is an important thing within life sciences. So championing unconditional accountability and cross-functional collaboration was a big theme for them. Being a mobilizer for the overall organization, so really taking that initiative and being a change agent. So I think this exemplifies what leading companies are doing to build quality into the overall corporate culture and strategy. So another piece I want to talk about, which kind of extends off of that strategy and leadership, is the business process excellence. So as companies mature, we're seeing the connection of different business processes within quality. And it's only natural. These processes feed into each other. So each company has their own CAPA process. Hopefully those processes are being harmonized. We were working with a large CPG company recently, and they had 18 different CAPA processes, all about the same, but they all had slightly different sets of steps. One had 5, one had 6, one had 7. They used slightly different naming conventions. It makes it really difficult to roll up and have any visibility of your CAPA process across a set of plants or roll that out to suppliers, right? There's big challenges in that. Then the other piece is then connecting that to your other processes. So if you have an audit management process, if you have a risk management process, those processes interact with your CAPA process. So when you have an issue in risk, maybe that should trigger a CAPA or help you prioritize your CAPAs. When you have a result from an audit, that can also trigger a CAPA. If those processes are distinct and disparate across your set of plants or across the different stages in your value chain, it's really difficult to trigger these actions and effectively manage these processes across the business. So we're seeing big trends around interconnecting your different quality processes. And of course, these are just 3 different examples that we called out here. There's a whole suite of quality processes that should be interconnected. And again, we're seeing benefits from companies that are taking this, what we call closed-loop quality management approach to quality. Again, we see about a 9% increase in OEE for those companies who have integrated these processes and truly have a closed-loop quality management system. And you also see the distributions. It's a much tighter distribution. So these companies really don't have, there's not a lot of underperformers among those companies that have closed-loop quality processes. So how do you tie that into a maturity framework? What are some of the things that you should be thinking about and working on? Leading companies really do have a governance model. They've established this to help harmonize these qualities across the enterprise, these quality processes across the enterprise. Change management is a huge piece when it comes to harmonizing processes. Everybody has their own version of the process. Everybody thinks their version of the process is the best version of the process. When you're trying to harmonize processes, you really have to listen to what each constituency says. That cross-functional team, that culture that you've built can drive and help with that harmonization. So you have to both listen to their needs at the local level, but then paint the bigger picture of the benefits for the organization when you do harmonize those processes. So it can be a big challenge for a lot of companies. It can be where we see a lot of EQMS implementations fail on that governance part, and it can extend and challenge those implementations. So focusing there is a big piece. Again, we talked about the integrated processes. Very often you start with 1 or 2 processes. A lot of times we see companies starting with CAPA and document management, but then extend out to additional processes over time that really do span the entire value chain, and then finally expand out into your supply base. And then I think a lot of companies are focused in the life sciences on validation. I don't spend a lot of time in this presentation on validation, but you have to have the supporting processes in your organization around validation, or that can, again, really trip up and increase cost in your IT systems. And especially as more and more products are moving to the cloud, having your own internal validation processes established can drive value. So this is another gentleman who spoke at our council recently and gave a case study. This gentleman, he's a multi-billion-dollar biotech. He's the director of risk and compliance at this company. He actually was director of corporate quality, implemented the QMS system, and then moved to risk after that, and really looked at risk as a building up an extension of the quality management system. So quality management was the GMP, but this company wants to manage risk across the overall organization. So patient safety, business integrity, there's a whole suite of different areas this company thinks they need to measure risk on and use this to drive their decision making. So this is where they started, and it's great, right? Interconnected quality processes, like we talked about, built off the standard definition of a QMS system, incorporating from product registration through customer complaints, all the way through the quality process and having those feedback loops. So most companies aren't even at this stage yet, but they've taken it the step further where they're looking at all these different processes and then rolling it up into their risk framework. So it's very much a bottom-up approach where you have to have your robust set of quality management processes. You want to have metrics that understand the performance of each of those processes. And then when you're outside of the identified risk levels around those processes, that's when it triggers issues. So your audit management process, if you're behind on supplier audits, for example, that can trigger your operational risk threshold. So it's very much a bottoms-up approach that builds upon your harmonized quality systems, and I think can help you better understand where those gaps might be in your quality system. So a lot of companies are focused on this today as an example of what a market-leading company can do. And this was just some of his major points that he saw of this approach driving, where the QMS system informs your risk and also gives you visibility into those business performance metrics, but gives you that framework to understand how performance and quality impacts the rest of the business. And it also gives you a framework to break down some of those functional silos. So let's get into the piece that I think we're all interested in here today, and understanding how EQMS is transforming the quality management landscape today. So the current landscape, I think it matches pretty well what the Acceleris folks were sharing. There is a number of different systems, all of which may or may not touch quality, depending on the system architectures that a particular company might address. But they do have some level of quality capabilities. So most companies have an ERP system. They may have a PLM system. They may have manufacturing systems. It's a very disjointed architecture that most companies have today. Hopefully some of you have seen this diagram. We've been promoting and talking about it for the past 2 years or 3 years now. And the way we think about it is how your systems are architected with quality at the center. So you could do a similar analysis with any type of system with a 360 view, but this is the 360 view of quality and the touch points that are important for your quality management system. So the way that we think about and talk about this diagram is most companies have an ERP system. It may not be that mature. You may have multiple ERP systems, but you have some generally accounting and financial system that may have been extended into manufacturing. It may have been extended into engineering. It may even be extended into quality. So what companies have to decide in each of these areas of the value chain, PLM, manufacturing, supply chain, are we going to do that with a best-of-breed solution provider, or are we going to try and do that with our ERP system? Generally, companies make that decision based on their competitive advantage and how flexible or inflexible their particular ERP system may be. Generally, companies wouldn't have all of those different bubbles with standalones. Some do. But generally, there's ERP and then maybe 1 or 2 other platforms that companies focus on around their IT architecture. The challenge is there's really no home for quality, which is why we put quality in the middle there. There are these quality processes that extend across the value chain. So you could do some of these things in PLM, for example, like NC Kappa. But it's challenging, right? It's very much engineering focused or R&D focused, depending on the industry. It's tough to get outside of that silo that PLM builds. PLM companies are moving that way. Dassault is moving that way. They've made acquisitions to help them move that way, but it's still a challenge for a lot of those companies. So that's why we think you need this quality platform at the center to manage those processes and connect them across the value chain, and then integrate where it makes sense with PLM or manufacturing or the supply chain or even CRM systems. And we see big trends around the adoption of EQMS today. If you look at ERP, 80% penetration rate across manufacturing companies, including life sciences. If you look at large companies, it's 95, almost 100% penetration rates. In quality, it's not the same story. It's still an emerging space. We see an adoption rate somewhere between 20 to 30%. Life sciences companies are more mature. They're definitely on the leading edge of adoption. They've been the leading industry for a long time in terms of systems. But it doesn't mean they're slowing down. There's still higher planned adoption rates in life sciences. In fact, we see 40% for pharma and 35% for med device. So there's a big trend right now around adopting these systems. A lot of activity, a lot of, in some cases, tire kicking. We see a lot of companies taking a long time to make these decisions. A lot of time in the planning stages without actually taking the plunge. A number of companies on the council joined the council 2 years ago, still haven't made their decision. There's a lot of different reasons and challenges for that. I also want to talk about the adoption of different functionalities there. We see a lot of companies stall out in terms of that integrated quality processes. So most companies in life sciences, and even across all industries, start with and often end with NC Kappa and document management. That's where a lot of compliance energy is focused. That's really the core of a quality management system. Sometimes they tie in training, but that's not where the business value is necessarily. It can drive your continuous improvement culture. It can help you get a handle on root cause analysis. But things like supplier quality management, for example, as that's a strategic initiative for your company, really can drive the best business value. And we see that life sciences companies are under implemented in supplier quality management. So you saw on the challenges slide earlier, this is the biggest challenge for life sciences companies, and you see on the technology slide, it's underdeveloped and underdeployed for life sciences companies. So this, I think, is an area that we're going to see continued investment in, and it's important as life sciences companies that we don't just do the compliance piece, we don't just get a CAPA system in there, get our documents managed properly, and call it quits. It's important to extend this across the business and add that additional layer of value. And we are seeing companies benefit, again, from the deployment of EQMS, not just in compliance, but also in operational benefit. So in our study, we saw those companies that had deployed an EQMS system having an improvement of about 7% in OEE. So again, a very significant benefit. And then similarly on the supplier collaboration front, this is on the supply chain metrics. So the numbers don't look quite as strong here, but there's a reason for that. On-time and complete shipment is a much more mature metric. We don't see nearly the distribution in OEE or in on-time and complete shipments as we do in OEE. It's a lot easier to improve in OEE than it is in on-time shipments, just because companies have been focused on it for a lot longer. So a 3% improvement in on-time and complete shipments really is a major improvement. Most companies are looking for 0.5%, 1% improvement in a year. So having that supplier quality web-based portal, cloud-based portal really drives a lot of benefit. And you can see the real tightening of that distribution. So those companies that have these supplier collaboration portals in place really are leading. There's no laggards within that group really that we saw. So major benefits, not just on the operational efficiency, but also on the supply chain performance. So how do you tie the technology capabilities into a maturity framework? I think it's important to take this broad-based approach, not just focus on NC Cap and document management, really look across the entire value chain and the full suite of quality processes. It's important to integrate with other enterprise applications. It could be the PLM systems on the R&D side. It could be the manufacturing systems, ERP and business intelligence systems. It gives a lot of benefit to have those integrations, especially on the performance management KPI side, which we'll talk about later. Focus on the analytics piece. That's a thing we see a lot of EQMS vendors focusing on, incorporating not just the basic reporting, but having real what-if analysis tools, data collection tools, allowing companies to answer questions that they want to have answered. We're also seeing the extension into cloud and mobility. So if you look at things like supplier quality, audit management, risk management, you want to be able to enable the user when they're on the shop floor, when they're at a client site, when they're at a supplier site, to be able to interact with the system easily. So that really goes to cloud and mobility. Then finally, we're seeing companies move into the social media side, the Internet of Things side, to be able to collect that data and be able to interact and collect social data as well. And then finally, we mentioned companies stalling on adopting EQMS. We see a lot of companies in the planning stages and then not necessarily making the investment. A major challenge that we see there is companies just focusing on the soft costs. So, okay, we're going to be able to improve the efficiency of handling documents. We'll be able to improve the efficiency of our CAPA process and say, okay, that'll save us X dollars per whatever. The challenge is that doesn't really impact the balance sheet. The way we see successful companies thinking about it is, all right, we'll have these process efficiency savings in quality that will allow us to become more predictive, move to preventive actions rather than just appraisal costs, and drive down those nonconformances in manufacturing. We saw that as one of the major challenges early on in life sciences. I think tying the adoption of technology to those goals that we have around nonconformance and manufacturing reduction really can help validate the investments we make in systems that improve our efficiency and quality. So this is another case study I wanted to share. This is a large medical device manufacturer. They make diagnostic equipment, multi-billion-dollar company. Again, presented at our executive council about a month ago. And they had a robust quality management system internally, and they took a lot of the learnings that they had on their own internal system and built on top of that a supplier collaboration platform. There's a number of different processes that they worked to build into that. They wanted their platform to be workflow-based, so they could really manage throughout the entire process how they interact with their suppliers. They wanted it to be a real-time system. They wanted to move away from FTP sites. They wanted to move away from email, phone call, fax, et cetera, and be able to do everything through the platform. They wanted to focus on transparency, so both they and their suppliers knew where in the process they were. And they wanted to go paperless. They wanted to eliminate the need for any manual forms. It supported a whole number of quality processes. So again, this is the idea of not just doing one or two processes, but going across audits, some of the procurement capabilities like an approved vendor list, as well as some of those quality processes like change requests, et cetera. And it was multi-language, and they built it really to improve the collaboration. And we were very happy to see that their model, their vision for the building of this system very much matched how we think quality systems should be architected and rolled out. So you have a harmonized set of processes or applications, you have a harmonized set of databases, and then you integrate those with both your internal systems. So they integrate with their ERP systems, their business intelligence systems, PDM, which is essentially their engineering systems, their learning management systems, their manufacturing systems, as well as their procurement systems to build this system. So it can be a challenge in terms of integration. So that platform approach to integration, I think, is important. But the overall benefits, I think, much outweigh the costs. The final piece I want to talk about are KPIs and performance management and how to think about quality across the value chain. We see a lot of companies today moving to become more predictive in their performance management capabilities. And there's really two ways to think about this, I think. One is on moving across the value chain. So understanding how the performance of a particular process, let's say in engineering, may impact or predict performance in manufacturing. The other way to think about it is process health and process results, and understanding the interplays there. So perhaps you're focused on your supplier defect rate as a big challenge for your organization. You could look at your engineering collaboration with your suppliers to try and understand whether or not you're going to be getting worse or better in supplier defect rate. You could also look at your quality process around supplier audits, and if you're behind or ahead there. So it's important to have the value chain view as well as the process view of where you can become more predictive in your performance management capabilities. Again, just some insights into how focus here can improve performance in manufacturing. In this case, we looked at the real-time visibility of quality metrics in manufacturing and being able to deliver that intelligence back to engineering or R&D. And we saw companies that have that capability, where they have the real-time view of manufacturing performance, or improve their new product introductions by 16%, which companies, that's a huge improvement. Because that can be a major cost and opportunity cost if you're missing your new product introduction targets. So what are some of the things companies are doing around their metrics programs? It's important to standardize these metrics globally. You want to make sure that the way you define metrics and what you measure across sites is standardized and also incorporates your quality metrics, risk metrics, and compliance metrics alongside your manufacturing and supply chain metrics, as well as your engineering metrics. You want to develop that clear understanding between leading and lagging indicators. It's different for every company. It takes some grunt work, I'd say, and some testing of models and theories to build that program, but you want to become more predictive. Again, this is where you have that connection between financial, operational, and quality metrics. You want to understand what happens in quality, how it impacts your finance. I talked before about operational excellence and continuous improvement teams. Those teams have invaluable skill sets to drive continuous improvement. So bringing those groups within your company into your performance management programs can be a big benefit. We're seeing a lot of interest today around cost of quality and how to measure that more effectively. That can be part of your performance management program. There's a lot of initiatives there. Then finally, it's important to look outward, to understand how you compare to those market leaders, how you compare to other industries, and understand really where your gaps are and where you should be focusing your improvement. So this is a final case study I wanted to share. This is a large, again, industrial company, largest glass company in the world, actually. It applies to life sciences as well as many other industries. And this is how they think about leading and lagging indicators and rolling up and down performance management. So they talk about the metrics pyramid. It's a pretty common concept. Some of you may have seen it or used it before. But at the base level, you have your physical production or physical process if you're in engineering and R&D. This is where your leading indicators really reside. And as you move up the pyramid, you're becoming more lagging, but also more financially based. And there should be flow up and down, communicating the vision from the top down to the plants, but then also communicating back up from the plants progress and results. So just a way to think about quality manufacturing performance, tying to financial performance, and how you communicate back and forth. And just some tips that this company used in building their performance management program. Sustainability is important, so you don't want to start a program, measure some metrics, 6 months quit, measure some new metrics. It's important to really have a long-term plan and stick to it. Clearly demonstrate and identify where those quality losses are and communicate those across the organization. And then build on those improvements and build in a continuous improvement culture where you track and respond. So how do we tie this into an overall plan for improving quality across an organization? I think it's important to start with that big picture market view. Really articulate the role of quality in your company's strategic initiatives and tie quality into those strategic initiatives. Corporate culture is a huge trend right now in life sciences, I think, when it comes to quality. We have to get out of the idea of being a policing organization and really enable and build quality into the overall organization. That starts, I think, with building quality into the leadership skill set, right? Embed that within what it means to be a leader within a company. And then we get into those core quality processes. It's about harmonizing your quality process across the organization, integrating those with R&D, with manufacturing for closed loop quality, and establishing that corporate standard for performance management, a standardized set of metrics that measures process health. These are what we're seeing companies working on. I think technology is a huge part in supporting that, and I think the movement towards a suite of products that goes across the value chain that are integrated on a platform really can help companies achieve that vision. So that's what the last year of working with life sciences companies and analyzing some of that survey data and case studies has identified for us as best practices. Hopefully they'll be useful for you as you're thinking about your businesses and where you can improve. Hopefully we gave you some new angles to think about. And I'm happy for taking any questions anyone may have about the research.